So the time from 1430 to 1500 was a very chaotic time, extremely chaotic, and this probably bipolar, eccentric guy named Filippo Brunelleschi probably started it all by reading Fibonacci's book and putting zero into the culture. Now, why was it Western culture? The Islamic culture in China and India, they already had absorbed zero into their cultures eons before. The Islamic culture never had any problem with zero. So what I'm trying to emphasize or try to throw out as a hypothesis is they absorbed zero without a cultural clash. It wasn't God created from the void. Yeah, I believe that. If you didn't try to make reason out of it, like Hawking does today, Stephen Hawking, if you didn't try to make reason out of it, you didn't go fine. It's just part of it. So it didn't cause this clash. But in the West, Earth was the center. We were the center of these perfect spheres, and reason and rationality ruled, and the world was perfect. Even Newton, after these guys, believed that. The world is perfect. Descartes believed the world is perfect. And here comes this guy throwing zero in, and now all of a sudden we got ellipses, and we've got weird things happening. So that when zero entered Western culture, it clashed with the ancient Greek culture that we inherited, plus the Christian culture, which grabbed onto that for perfection. So it was just like the Kapu system in Hawaii. When that went, it put a severe crack in the system, and our Western culture was cracked by the work of Fibonacci and Brunelleschi. When this finally was accepted into the culture had to change to adapt to it. And that became the Reformation. So you can see how the rules of ethics now would all become called into question. You know, we say, well, all the stuff that we believed in. Next week, we'll talk a little about Galileo, someone you know about. And just as when Galileo showed the Vatican astronomer, what he was looking at, the astronomer fainted. He fainted because it just pulled his worldview out from under him. He could not accept it. So the whole world was about to change. The other thing that I don't have time to talk about, I wish I had time, there's three great women that existed in this time, around the 11th century. And I don't have time to tell you about them, but if you ever get a chance to read about any one of them, of course, is Eleanor of Aquitaine. She was related to William the Conqueror, who conquered England. She got a nice piece of France for that. And she ended up siring most of the Europe kings and queens for the next 200 years. She had so many kids. There's a great movie about her called The Lion in Winter with Peter O'Toole. She was so fiery that her husband, King Henry II, was fiery himself. He had her put in jail. He kept her under house arrest. And that movie, The Lion in Winter, is about this small segment of Eleanor's life where she was held. And so Catherine and Peter O'Toole go at it in the movie. Their son, by the way, is Richard the Lionheart. And he's played by, who's that mass murderer? The English guy. Oh, I can't think of his name. Anyway, if you get a chance to rent that movie, that's a great movie. Because you've seen a piece of her life, but the rest of her life is fantastic. The other woman I don't have time to talk about is a little diminutive Catherine of Siena. And what happened in the 14th century is things got so chaotic between the Pope and the kings that the King of France actually captured the Pope, put him in Avignon, and for about 80 years they had French popes. They wouldn't let, it's supposed to be the Bishop of Rome, but they kept him in Avignon, and a succession of cardinals developed. So we had competing cardinals, there's French cardinals electing French popes, and Catherine was the one who went to see him about 70 years after this started, and she said, man up. Rome's in chaos. There's no government in Rome. They're tearing it apart. Go home. And he thought that she was speaking the Holy Spirit, so he went back. And when he went back, they had competing people electing popes. They had like three popes at one time, all legitimately elected by cardinals. So the whole world was in chaos, and chaos was started by this little 5-foot Catherine of Siena, whose life is just a fantastic story. And the third one, of course, you know the third one is when the chaos of William the Conqueror, when they came into France, they scared the heck out of everybody at the time, and France would have fallen, and I think most of France would be England today if it wasn't for another little girl, 19-year-old named Joan of Arc, right? Joan of Arc basically saved France from English intrusion at the time, and opposed everybody. She opposed the church, she opposed the prevailing powers, and of course was killed for it. But her life, Mark Twain wrote her story And even Mark Twain considers that book, Joan of Arc, his greatest work. Almost nobody reads it, right? But it's a great story. So I'm skipping all the really good history. It's great history at that time. And you can see how the world of ethics is changing, because as these different popes spring up, legitimately elected by different cardinals, and the Reformation comes in and reason is questioned, you can see how every city has to pick, well, I'm for this pope. Well, I'm for Pope Clement over here. Well, I'm for this emperor. So the whole Western culture started to stratify in little globules of belief systems, where you would go into a city and there'd be flags around the city. And you say, was that a Ghibelline or a, the cities had names that said who their allegiance was to. And then you'd have to carry a flag on your side so you could get in without getting killed. This is the time that Shakespeare wrote about.